In 2022, Asia Society India Centre presented Around the Table, Conversations About Milestones, Memories, Mappings, an exhibition developed in collaboration with the Kiran Nadar Museum of Art, or the KNMA, and was on view at KNMA Saket, New Delhi from November 4th to December 22nd. The exhibition was conceptualized to commemorate the legacy of Asia Society India's Asia Arts Game Changer Awards and to reflect on 75 years of India's independence. Curated by Roobina Karode, Chief Curator and Director of the KNMA, the exhibition was centered around the intersecting artistic journeys of 7 artists, all of whom have been honored as vanguards by Asia Society India, including Arpita Singh, Ghulam Mohammad Sheikh, Himmat Shah, Jyoti Bhatt, Krishan Khanna, Vivan Sundaram, and the late Akbar Padamsee, whose contributions as initiators, pedagogues, authors, mentors, and shapers of art movements in the years following independence remains irrefutable. Presented across 4 galleries, Around the Table was designed as a maze of memories where art meets archives. Join us as curator Roobina Karode takes us on a journey through this maze, unpacking the making of this exhibition and spotlighting key artworks and ideas in the process.
Around the Table, Conversations About Milestones, Memories, Mappings is a very special exhibition presented by Asia Society India Centre and the Kiran Nadar Museum of Art in Delhi. Hi, I am Roobina Karode, Chief Curator and Director of the Kiran Nadar Museum of Art and a member of Asia Society India's Art Council. This exhibition is focused on 7 artists: Akbar Padamsee, Arpita Singh, Ghulam Mohammad Sheikh, Himmat Shah, Jyoti Bhatt, Krishan Khanna, and Vivan Sundaram. It recollects the times and practices of a magnificent generation of artists who have all been awarded the Asia Society's Vanguard Game Changer Award, and this exhibition pays a small tribute to them. These artists not only stand out as distinct voices, but are trailblazers known as pedagogues, thinkers, writers, scholars, and great inspiration for subsequent generations of artists. Curatorially, the exhibition unfolds a fluid space across 4 galleries, each one given a distinct title or dealing with a subtext of the exhibition, showing material that spans across decades, also through different mediums, for instance, artists' recordings, recent recordings of their voices and their thought processes, their paintings, diaries, photographs, and a lot of archival material as well. The first gallery where I am standing is titled Tree of History, River of Time, and it presents to viewers narrations by artists both in the form of their seminal paintings as well as short films conducted through conversational interviews by Asia Society India Centre and produced by Hakat Studios. This becomes, for me, this is the perfect place for the viewer to enter into the lives of the artist and to start experiencing the exhibition Around the Table. Besides new approaches to art making, what one is fascinated in this gallery to look at is how artists are addressing the city, the stories around the city, the characters that they see around the city, their life, their surroundings, and also drawing inspiration for multiple references both from literature, history, and mythology. For instance, when you look at Arpita Singh's Golden Deer, and it's such a fascinating painting where she uses a mythological story but is actually making a comment on everyday life as observed in her time. I find this also interesting to look at from the point of view that she's someone who really uses paint in a way that she wants to create a kind of hide and seek while she is painting. So a lot of things get buried and submerged within the textured layers of a painting, and one has to actually pay attention and go close to understand how the characters are repeating and a narrative continues and is unfolding in the entire canvas space, which becomes her landscape for telling the story. Also, the use of gold, the use of yellows, the use of repetition as a way to really make the story accessible and enjoyable is what Arpita is known for. So Arpita, in one sense, is someone who really loves to tease the viewer, take us in and out of the painting, really, and takes great. She's very interested in the way that she presents her characters through gestures, through objects, through little details that she would bring in. For instance, the flying planes all around, the pistol in the hand of the figure, and then we are left with some kind of an intrigue to get more interested into understanding what she is presenting as a narrative. One of the most recurrent themes in Kishan Khanna is Bandwala, which started coming into his paintings from the 1980s onwards. This painting is called Celebration, and you can see that it is a 5-part painting which really talks about celebration, or a procession of celebration that he has tried to capture using the canvas in optimal ways, completely covering it with his characters, with the tempo of the procession and the way the celebration is happening, the moment of that celebration. But the characters of Kishan Khanna may look celebratory, may be in their very shiny uniforms, but often they are filled with pathos and pain. And that character really comes through in many of the ways in which he paints them. He has always said that the Bandwalas, a British Raj legacy that was left behind, was then embraced and entered into barats in Indian weddings, and that is where they started performing, but they still look as if they are performing a parade, in their red uniforms, and often standing for hours, following processions. Sometimes they look like as if they're tired, they're exhausted, and their expressions or their faces have no expression, or rather very serene expressions. What is interesting in this composition is also in the way Kishan Khanna has, because he has worked on murals as well, the whole idea of how to use space and create a dramatic narrative unfold has been his forte. And we see that this whole gesturing of hands, where hands go up, right, left, and eyes move around, there is a kind of a visual movement that he creates in the painting, which takes you from one to another, from one canvas to the other, or one part to the other, and shows the continuity of the time that the procession was happening. Through his other subjects, such as the truckwalas or street laborers, Kishan Khanna has tried to talk about the duality of life. On one hand, what he witnessed as celebration, but also the deep pathos that he experienced in the city. This gallery, titled Conversations, Camaraderie, Community, presents Jyoti Bhatt's photographic documentations over 6 decades or more. Jyoti Bhatt, who was a student first at the MS University of Baroda and later on joined as a teacher at the Faculty of Fine Arts in Baroda, has been very actively witnessing and being part of the institution building that happened at the Faculty of Fine Arts, along with his colleagues, along with his friends, along with his co-travelers. And what we see here is a treasure trove of images, of stories, of moments that were captured by him in the due course of his time. This gallery for me was great fun because it took me back to my own time at MSU when I was a student as well, and looking at what all had happened in the due course of time, or what all had happened in the years that the so-called Baroda school was active. We see him taking pictures of artists in their studios. We see pictures taken while there was an art fair and a preparation of an art fair that was happening extensively, and students and teachers were equally participating in the process. We see artists' portraits. We see portraits of critics, writers, and it's a very fun kind of a gallery where a lot of people have spent a lot of time enjoying the photographs, enjoying the moments and the memories that have been captured in these black and white presentations. While there are several photographs that capture the tone and temper of the times, the congeniality and the everyday conversations that happened on the premise, there are some which particularly draw attention. For instance, Himmat Shah in a very heroic pose with all the brushes, showing himself standing close to his painting right here in a studio. And here is Jyoti Bhatt, who is taking a self-portrait way before the time of selfies, and Raghav Kaneria at work. So you do see also pictures of artists at work in their studios or outside. For instance, Shankhu Chaudhary, trying to working on a sculpture, and these are really moments which are so special. They are so much about the place, the site that was where artists were really gravitating, and really new ideas were emerging, new conversations were happening, cups of chai were happening, everything was happening, and that is what I think is so important and so relevant when we look at this photo documentation that Jyoti Bhatt has extensively spent time with. This gallery is titled Looking Through the Viewfinder, and it really talks about how these artists, often in the 1950s, traveled abroad, came back exposed to new technologies, often with a camera, and were fascinated by lens-based practice. They were literally lured by the camera, so to say. And but somehow that remained, because they were painters and sculptors, that remained like something that they were preoccupied with, but often their works were not shown because photography then in India was still not part of the mainstream modernist discourse. So this room was created specially to look at what they did in photography, how they used the camera. For instance, Krishan Khanna, from a very colorful world of his painting, you see him, taking images and really seeing the world in black and white. And photography made it possible actually to capture instantaneously moments that would slip by. So something like crows near his studios or around his studios, or something else like this, like Hussein on the scaffold, and waving from one part to the other. These became very special moments that Krishan Khanna could really address through the camera. So while in Akbar we see these intimate photographs, or rather photographs taken in a studio, studio photography, you go to Ghulam Sheikh and we see that he was more interested in actually exploring photography in his travels or through his travels. So you have Fatehpur Sikri or his visits to Samarkand, Isfahan, many such places, and seriously documenting the different sites. And again, his emphasis would be on his love for perspective. You know, how you, in his paintings also you see how there is perspectival rendering, you know, interest in play between proximity and distance, which you come to see in his works. So somewhere you have facades closely detailed out, but on the other hand you also see the vistas and, you know, how space unfolds. A stop motion animation done in the late 60s, in the 1960s, called Sizigi. And perhaps for Akbar it was very important. In fact, when he got the Nehru Fellowship, he opened a vision exchange workshop. He set up an exchange workshop in Mumbai, which was all about artistic experimentation and really bringing a lot on the table, which was exploration of different new tools and technologies through this workshop. And a lot of artists landed up there, including Nalini Malani, Nasreen Mohammadi, and several others. And I think first time they had the facility of a dark room to work with and to really learn about the new medium, you know, what a dark room is, how to pull a negative, you know, what it is to really create a photogram, for instance, and things like that. And for Akbar, he produced two films, you know, which are really seminal and very relevant work of that time. One being Sizigi. I think we have heard that he was very inspired by Paul Klee's pedagogical diagrams, and this is one where he really works with the idea of lines, you know, and realignment of you know, celestial bodies, which could be an inspiration from astronomy, or then, you know, working through thousands of drawings to create you know, or program, you know, making of forms. We are now in the last gallery titled Tales from the Attic, and curatorially I think the exhibition has been a playful adventure. I have worked with ideas that have been with me for very long, having visited many artists' studio, watched them work, and often, you know, when the studios were smaller with less space, how they used to put their works or hang their works till the top, till the ceiling. And some of those ideas have been articulated here, of course. But what is interesting about this space is it allows you to see new kinds of stories, juxtapositions, unexpected encounters happening. And they also reveal how these journeys were parallel journeys. Sometimes artists were together or individually exploring diverse practices, diverse mediums, you know, and working with the notion of working with the idea of versatility, so to say. Though they started as painters and really adopted the easel painting, they soon digressed from it, and they soon started exploring other mediums. For instance, Akbar's interest in drawing, Akbar's interest in lithography, so to say, or making prints, or then making films, you know, or Vivan's interest, you know, when he started, you know, in the first gallery you have him start as a painter, but then he goes into making, he actually makes forays into digital photography, into montages, into sculptural assemblages, and also creating environments in which viewers can walk into. So there has been a use of space and scale very differently in the artists as they progressed and as they evolved their practices over the years. And some part of it or some of it has been explored in this space. Also bringing in a lot of material that comes from artists' personal notebooks and diaries. You know, they belong to a culture where sketching was important, when everyday drawing was important. A lot of them practiced drawing, or a lot of them did printmaking. For instance, Jyoti Bhatt became a very significant printmaker. And we see a lot of his experimentation here in the way that he has explored heads as a recurrent theme. On the other hand, you have Himmat's heads, but I'm going to talk right now about Jyoti Bhatt. So Jyoti Bhatt, in fact, used the recurrent image of the head and experimented profusely using different printmaking methods, using sometimes a modernist language, drawing from mythology as well, creating dense imagery sometimes working with geometry and images together. And we see here a wall which has many such experiments of Jyoti Bhatt that have been put together, whether it was to do with splitting of the image, whether it was multiplication of the image, so to say, in one frame, within one frame, sometimes adding text and bringing in more meanings. He was known for his humor and satire, which also gets revealed in the way that he used the image and the replication of the image. Simplification of the image was important for him to make the art accessible, and infusing it with, you know, topical subjects, topical meanings, you know, and creating new kinds of narratives around the recurrent image. Ghulam sir was also a teacher, and I remember how wonderful it was to be listening to him and learning art history from him. He always talked about the simultaneity of cultures in India, you know, how India was a plural culture, or a culture which had assimilated from many other cultures, you know. As you walk through this space, you will see that there is archival material which is on the table, and so around the table there could be several conversations that can happen between viewers themselves. You have works on easel, because again that has something to come from the studio, sometimes objects lying on pedestals. And as you walk through, you also see Krishan Khanna's truck drivers, you see different kinds of subjects that he has engaged with. For instance, both Akbar Padamsee and Krishan Khanna have painted the Christ figure. And I think it was important for them to paint the Christ figure, which was a figure of salvation, a figure which brought in sympathy for people, especially the people who were underprivileged and working hard, laboring through the day for their wages. As we go ahead, what becomes very interesting in this space is also the drawings by Arpita, the drawings by Himmat, or Vivan, or Akbar. They all come together and very different in terms of how they treat the graphite, how they work with the elementary form of bringing out the thought process, using drawing as a medium. And for instance, in Himmat, there is such playfulness. The drawing is never a preparatory tool for him to really premeditate about his sculptures. It's a medium, it's a creative medium in itself. And I want to just point out here a beautiful drawing which is absolutely minimal, where he shared with me an instance that he was watching in nature two very delicate branches meeting each other. And as they were meeting each other time and again, it was almost as if they were romancing. And he wanted to really make that romance permanent, marry them, and therefore he drew them and then put a pin there, as if he was actually creating a permanent relationship between them. So there are these very little, even minimal drawings, but the observations were amazing in case of Himmat. He always talked about how drawing allowed you to free yourself. It was something that was not to do with, it is a medium where a conscious interposition of thought and thinking and reasoning is suspended completely, and you could actually find anything and everything so interesting as you looked around. And something like this also could draw an artist's attention. He also played with the idea of scale in his work, where the space was very important, more than the drawing of figures itself. And so this kind of a scaling of space is something that you find remarkably used by Himmat and explored by Himmat in his drawings as well as in his sculptures. For instance, when you look at the scale here, that the idea of really giving a sense of scale, the photograph taken was has been known to really become a wall space, but it's also to allow the viewers to enter into the arid desert that Himmat had ventured into many years back, when he was trying to just test the limits of his being, and he ran away from every kind of imposition or test that came from academic learning or from the way that an artist must work. And that's how he landed up in the desert. And what does he do there? He picks up what material is available on the side, whether it was blanched wood, uneven wood, ropes, bits of ropes, broken ladders, fragments of bones. That is what he picked up and created these huge sculptures, which actually were left on site to perish, because these were perishable sculptures. They did not even have an audience, so to say. But for Himmat to really release his creativity, it was important. And what he learned from that was also the fact that an artist must let go of everything that is unnecessary for their making. Whatever is irrelevant, whatever unnecessary can be abstracted, can be left behind. He became interested in a medium that which is a very ancient medium, which is terracotta, and really understanding the nature of earth, how earth matters, the nature of earth. He started living with clay in a studio. For several years, he was experimenting with clay. He was understanding the nature of clay, understanding the temperature of clay, and how he could completely understand his material before he started experimenting and bringing a very contemporary sensibility to an ancient medium like terracotta. Terracotta has been used earlier to make toys. It was used for different purposes, but Himmat has given it a contemporary edge. And what you see in his iconic heads is it brings back memories of different kinds. An ancestral memory, maybe a ritual object. It could be an iconic head. It could be many more things, and something that you could have found also in totemic images, totems that you see. And but he did different things with terracotta. For instance, he worked with terracotta. He also foiled them with gold leaf. He used to foil them with silver leaf. He also tried to give it a ceramic feel. He sometimes translated them also into bronze sculptures and brought in different patina. So here is Himmat, and each head really peers through. I find it fascinating how he creates textures on the surfaces of this. And he has literally, he has actually devised tools like a tailor, who really stitches or creates stitches on the head. He creates dents on them. He creates a texture on them. He uses eye as a hole, which is a very significant placement of a dot or a hole. And even the transmutation through cracks and crevices, or something like this, like a tailor who is actually stitching, on the surface of the head. And that is something that he mastered, both making the tool and actually being able to fire the terracotta at a degree that nobody had ever experimented with.
Thank you for joining us on the journey of Around the Table Conversations About Milestones, Memories, Mappings, presented as a tribute to the 7 extraordinary artists who have been recognized as Asia Society India's Vanguard Awardees at our annual Asia Arts Game Changer Awards India from 2017 to 2022. We hope this walkthrough has allowed you to get a glimpse of the artists' intersecting artistic worlds, tracing the arc of their journeys through one of the most important phases in the history of South Asia. Asia Society is committed to promoting, building, and strengthening ties between South Asia and the world through its cultural programming, and this exhibition represented this mandate. The Kiran Nadar Museum of Art is a non-commercial organization that exemplifies the dynamic relationship between arts and culture through its exhibitions, publications, and educational public programs. So a big thank you to Kiran Nadar, Roobina Karode, and the KNMA team for this collaboration.